these sessions for me. Thank you, Sheila. Here's my answer to that question. My answer to that question is whoever I represent.
Oh.
Oh yeah, Kimberly put it. There you go. That's exactly right. Whoever I represent. Because and this is the point I'm making. When I'm the one who's constantly reminding them and empowering them that they get to make the choices, that they have arm on their side, they continue to feel powerful. They continue to feel like they're in control. And perception becomes their reality. Right? So that is a strategy that I encourage you to use, because I will guarantee you, you will find yourself putting more transactions together than not when your clients feel like they are empowered to continue to be in control of the scenario. They get to say yes. They get to say no. It's always a less strong, a weaker deal. Couldn't come up with weaker. A weaker deal if someone feels pushed or coerced or forced in some way to say yes to something. Far better when they feel like they're making a play from a position of power. So just continue to remind them that you are in control of this. You get to say yes, no, or modify, right? Number 8 goes on to say that no counter is not typically a good business decision. Now, again, we live in a state where the market ultimately has people countering higher than asking or higher than their higher offer, right? So no counter becomes almost a different conversation in today's marketplace, but in a more normalized market, I will tell you that as a listing agent, my sellers, and they knew this from the very beginning when they hired me, they were not allowed not to counter an offer. And I counseled them through that.
Right. Well, what if it's full price and everything they wanted?
Well, if it's full, well, then they can just say yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, right. Or let me ask this: I recently made an offer last weekend. The unit was on for 169.9. I made an offer at 175, and I got countered at 180. Can sellers do that? Can they counter you higher than I mean, I already made an offer over asking price, and they came back and countered me $5,000 even higher. Can they do that? Yeah, I see a lot of nodding heads. Yeah, of course they can, right? They're the seller. They can do whatever they want, right? They could have come back to me and said, I mean, we counter you at 210, right? And then as the buyer, I get to make another decision. Well, that sounds crazy. I'll pay you 180. Well, no, we want 210. Okay, well, then I'm out, right? It's just everyone gets to make a decision back and forth. What's the point? The point is not countering an offer shows extreme inflexibility on the part of the seller. And if you think people don't talk, you'd be wrong, right? And so Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you don't want the reputation of being the inflexible seller out there. When someone comes to the park with 2 gloves and a baseball, and you take 1 glove and they have 1 glove, and you stand 75 feet apart, and one person throws the ball to the other one, and then that person turns around and goes home and takes the ball with them, well, you're not having a catch anymore, right? You got to throw it back. My counsel for sellers was always, in a scenario where you don't like the number, make a point by countering with a small amount of money. Counter by $1,000 and make your point that way, but counter with something. The other script that I used to use was, because sometimes sellers get offended. Oh, I can't believe they made an offer that low. I'm offended. Anybody ever have that? So the first script I like in that situation is, talk to me about that, because it almost seems to me, after 44 showings, that we maybe should be offended by all the people that didn't stop and actually write an offer on the property, put pen to paper to purchase this home from you. And instead, we're choosing to be offended by the one person who actually saw enough value to go ahead and write it up. It seems a little backwards to me, right? Does not seem backwards to you? So here's the good news, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You get to make a point. You get to say, thank you, and I'd like some more money. So let me ask you this. If the house is on the market for $595 and you get an offer for $500, which a year ago, nobody on this call would have thought was all that bizarre. Of course, now that we've lived through the 12 months that we've lived through, you're like, when would that ever happen, right? And yet a year ago, it was happening all the time. And so again, my strategy for that with sellers is, okay, so let's talk about strategically putting on your what if cap, right? And so your what if cap says you're listed at $595, you received an offer for $500, your thought is not to counter. Let's play the what if game, and that says you're all listed for $595 and you've now received an offer for $565. What is it you think you'd counter with? And amazingly, 9.5 times out of 10, the seller says, oh, well, if it was a reasonable offer like $565, I'd probably counter at $590 or, $585. Okay, great. So what do you have to lose doing the exact same thing with the offer that's on the table? Like, people are so afraid that the concept of making an offer versus where the list price is that you end up meeting in the middle. Guys, you have to help people recognize that's not called a negotiation. That's called averaging. That's not what we do, right? Negotiation is different than that. And yet sellers remain fearful. Again, this market gives them a little bit more of an edge. And yet once things normalize, sellers typically remain fearful that a low offer means a low end point. And I will tell you, as a listing agent, that is not what I experienced. My conversation with sellers was always from the perspective of, you know what, let's make a valid counter based on where you think you want to end up, not where the middle is, but based on where you want to end up. Let's make a valid counter, and then let me go and do my job. Because it's my job to move the buyers from where they are to where you want to be. If you give me nothing to go back with, I can't do my job, right? And then the conversation, I would call Patrick, who's on the buy side, and say, hey, Patrick, look, here's the deal. They're going to counter it at $585. Your folks have to move out of the realm of like the unreasonable here and into the realm of what is reasonable. Because there's unless you're at 550 or above, there's not going to be another conversation. So let's move them into the realm of what is reasonable here and then figure out where we end up. I can't tell you how many times I've had that kind of a conversation. The buyer's agent goes back, has that conversation with them, and all of a sudden money shows up because buyers sometimes just try to make the steal. And then when they get rejected with the steal, because the listing agent has come back strong and said, look, that's not going to work. Here's something that will work. Let's at least get them to there and then see if we can put them together. All of a sudden, there's a big bounce, right? So again, just some strategies with real life scenarios to arm you with conversations with your sellers. Number 9, you may want to call the name on the mortgage pre-qual letter and ask some questions about the buyer, such as, do you have any concerns about their ability to obtain this mortgage? Anything I should know, right? Can you, as the listing agent, call the buyer's mortgage person?
I think you can.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage it, right? It's the whole reason they give you a letter. Especially if I happen to know the person at the bottom of the letter, I'm going to call and ask some questions. I used to call and ask questions that I knew people shouldn't really be answering.
Like what?
And see what would happen. So, anything you can tell me about the buyer's program? Are they, have you gone through and looked at credit and assets? Are the credit and assets strong? Do you see any issues based on their credit report? Have you confirmed employment? Do you see any issues with the employment responses? Have they made application yet, or are you still kind of filling out the application? As you fill out the application with them, do you see anything that might cause you concern? Are they rate shopping? Do you think they might dump you if they find somebody with a lower rate? I would ask all those questions. Again, good loan officers shouldn't answer most of what I just asked, right? They can answer some basic questions, but not every loan officer is a good loan officer. Now remember, who do I represent in that scenario?
Your client.
I represent the seller. So I'm going to find out as much as I possibly can. And if somebody says something they shouldn't say, that's not on me, that's on them, right?
Where can you get that buyer's mortgage person's phone number, or contact information?
It's right on the pre-approval letter that they've provided to you.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, the other thing I would encourage you to do is I used to just give the buyer's agent a heads up, so that it wasn't a surprise. I mean, they gave me the letter. I have every right to kind of check it out, but just to keep everybody calm and smiling, I would always just give a phone call to the, hey, Kimberly, I just wanted to let you know I am going to make a quick phone call to the loan officer just to verify the pre-qual, and I just wanted to just let you know that. I found that people appreciated knowing that, so that it wasn't a big surprise. Number 10, once the offer is negotiated and acceptable to both parties, ask the agent for the buyer to rewrite the offer with the new price and any new terms, get everybody's signature and get it to you as quickly as possible, right? So you're ultimately going to rewrite things with the new price and terms so that you have a nice clean copy, get everybody to sign it, and all that should happen within 24 hours. There really isn't a reason, in my opinion, nowadays, with electronic signatures that everyone can do on their phones, why you can't have a fully executed whatever you're using within 24 hours, right? Maybe somebody's hospitalized or in surgery, even being out of the country, you still have your phone when you're out of the country. You can still press 2 buttons and DocuSign your contract when you're on a cruise or you're, in the bush of Alaska or wherever, right? So the whole idea that people need so much time. Remember I said yesterday, time is not your friend in these scenarios. You got to keep these things moving. And so as the listing agent, that is your main function. Once you have an offer on the table, your main function is to keep all the plates spinning and keep everyone facing forward and taking steps. If you become a bit of a pest about that, that's okay. That's the role. That's the job. You've got to keep everybody moving. Yes, Karen.
Okay, so I have a question. I've been in a listing presentation and it's like he and haw, and they say we have to think about it. I said, okay. And I paused and they said, well, we have to think about it. I said, you know what? I'm going to excuse myself for a couple of minutes. I'll give you some time to think and I'll come back. But so that worked. But what if they said we need to think about it for a day or two?
So think about signing the offer?
Yeah.
It will be gone.
Yeah. So again, if you're the listing agent and your seller says, boy, this is a tough one. We have to think about it for a day or two. I think my script would be, let's talk about what it is you need to think about. Let's isolate where the trouble spot is. Are you committed to selling the property? Yes. Okay. Are you willing to accept this number for the property? Yes. Are you willing to close on this date? Well, we kind of hope to be here, through the end of school. Okay. So other than the closing date, are you willing to sign this offer right now? Yes. Okay. So let's now talk about that. Should we go back and see if these particular buyers will delay the closing by a month so that your kids can finish school? Well, yes. Okay, let's do that then. Right? The whole idea of we have to think about it, the signing of an offer, right now, sellers would probably get away with that. Let's face it, right? Because buyers are sitting waiting for at the behest of each seller. In a more normalized market, if I represented the buyer, I'd be like, okay, what is it you're thinking about? It's either yes or it's no. Say yes to us and let's move forward, or say no to us so we can go buy a different house. Right? I would, as the buyer's agent, I would start putting pressure on that seller without a 24-hour response. Right? So it's all going to be dependent upon the people involved. Right? I have just no patience, and I want to move things forward. And it's not about having patience per se. It's about recognizing, again, what I said. There's at some point, you just have to make a decision. It's yes or it's no. Right? Number 11, ask the agent for the buyer who the buyer's attorney will be, who the buyer will be using for the home inspector and the septic inspector. Right? All those things should now either be scheduled or be being scheduled. If they're not already scheduled, to me, the buyer's agent now has 24 hours to go ahead and get me that information. Get those things scheduled within the time frames that we outlined in the accepted offer, right? Most buyer's agents are pre-scheduling things nowadays, at least they should be, as a way to continue to win the offer, right? But if that isn't done, there's no reason that you should have to wait 3 days to find out when the inspections are. Frankly, the inspections should be being done by the third day, in my opinion, right? So it's that proactiveness and setting expectations. Remember, as the listing agent, you get to drive the bus. It's your bus to drive. And the buyer's agent has to kind of fall in line with the standards that you set on your listings. Don't take the back seat. You can't drive the bus from the back seat. Your arms are not long enough, right? You've got to be sitting in the driver's seat to be able to drive the bus. And that means being clear about what it is that has to happen next, and stepping into that role of leadership in the transaction, right? People ask me all the time, why do we talk about leadership so often in this organization? I'm not a leader. Incorrect. You are leading your buyers and your sellers. When you're doing this properly, you are leading every single day, right? And once there's a transaction, someone has to emerge as the leader of that transaction. As a listing agent, that should be you. By the way, when we talk about the buyer side, I'm going to tell you that as a buyer's agent, it should be you as well, just so you're prepared for it, right? My point is, well-trained real estate agents recognize that somebody needs to step up and into a leadership role in a transaction in order to make sure the transaction moves forward. Don't wait for somebody else to do it, because you'll be disappointed most of the time, right? Just recognize that you get to be that, which is kind of awesome, because then you're just driving the bus no matter what side. We're working on the list side now, and on the list side, you absolutely are driving the bus, right? Number 12, once you have the information above, again, 24 hours, prepare a contract information sheet, make sure all the supporting documentation gets to both attorneys, and then package all that stuff, your new pending listing paperwork, and get that to our KW Concierge Services so that they can get that into command and create your commission opportunity and submit everything to the market center, right? That's the path that goes through, which is number 12, and then into 13. Number 14, once the inspection dates are set, be certain to inform the seller. I know that sounds like a stupid bullet point, but I will tell you that I one time, earlier in my career, had one of my sellers call me at about 8:45 in the morning. I said, "Hey, how are you?" She said, "Well, I'm okay. How are you?" And I said, "I'm great. What's up?" And she said, "Well, I'll tell you what's up. I am standing here in my kitchen with my 3 children, cooking them breakfast. I am in my nightgown, and there's a large posse of people ringing my front doorbell, telling me that there's an inspection here starting in about 14 minutes. Guess what? They were right. I forgot to let the seller know when the inspection was going to be. Oops. Told you I've made every mistake you can possibly think of. The good news is I survived. She survived. I apologized. I said, "Do you want me to have them rescheduled?" She said, "No." if you can ask them to give me a half hour, I will get myself dressed and get these kids out, and we'll have the inspection. And she did just that. So I called the buyer's agent and said, look, I am so sorry. There was a little bit of a screw up. I completely take ownership of it. If the inspector can start outside and do some outdoor stuff for the next 30 to 40 minutes and give her an opportunity, you'll have the house. And we made it work. So again, the reason it's on your checklist is because I don't want you to forget. I don't want you to make the same mistake that I did, right? So just know it's there and make sure that you communicate that information to your seller. And then of course, prep the seller for anything that they might have to do. If there's any preparatory work, do they have to, air out the basement 24 hours prior to a radon test being set or anything like that? So you want to make sure that the seller is not just aware of when it happens, but prepared for anything that might have to be prepped for. Kimberly.
One of the things that the past 15 months have taught me is to use systems. And when you're using showing time, you have the opportunity to put in the request for the inspection and the appraisal through showing time. They can't accept it. And now everybody's been notified and it's in writing. So you don't have to worry about, did I text the agent? Did I call the agent? Did I speak with the agent? This way, you did because it's been accepted and everybody's all on the same page.
Yeah, I love that, and it's so true. I'll tell you, when I bought the first two properties for our KW investment group a couple of months ago, that was the first time that I had ever been pushed to do exactly what Kimberly just said. It was for the inspection and for the appraisal. Both of them, I texted the listing agent and said, so here's what we'd like. And she said, you know what, that probably is fine. Please put it in through showing time. And at the time I thought to myself, oh, come on, what a pain. I have to go and do that. But from a listing agent's perspective, it's exactly what Kimberly said. Then everyone is notified. There's all acceptance. Everyone thumbs up the time and the date, and you don't have to worry about that follow-up piece. So utilize those tools, utilize that technology to make sure that you work that into your system. Number 15, report the property as under agreement, which is now, we now know is either show or deposit, depending on your seller. Now this dates this document. This document says within 48 hours. The old rule used to be 48 hours. As of September of 2020, they changed that rule to 24 hours, right? So now any status change has to be reported to the MLS within 24 hours. So let me ask you this. What if your seller says, you know what, we're going to accept this offer, but I do not want you to mark it in the MLS until after the inspection. And the inspection's, 4 or 5 days away. What do? I see a whole lot of lips moving, but I'm not reading lips very well. Somebody has to actually unmute. There we go.
Again, please.
Ask the question again.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So you accept an offer on a Sunday. The seller signs it. We send it back. The inspections are scheduled for Thursday, and the seller says, "I do not want you to report this as under agreement or whatever in the MLS. I want it kept as active until after the inspections because I don't want to put myself in a position of having it go under agreement and then come back on the market." What do you do?
Show.
Yeah, so the quick answer is you move it to show. What's the conversation with the seller?
These are the restrictions that, first of all, there's no meaningful difference between what they say they want and the status. That's number one.
Agreed.
So make that clear and say, yes, I understand. This is how that's going to look.
Yeah, and so I love that Alex initially went to two of the most powerful words like in any conversation, right? I understand, right? The other two are, I'm sorry, and then the other two are thank you, right? There's all these little strategic powerhouse phrases that you need to keep in your arsenal because that's exactly right. I understand, even though in the back of my head I'm thinking, Like, what? There's no, what, like, why? Like, why are you overthinking this? Like, what are you making a drama about this for? The words that come out instead of all of that are, I understand. Unfortunately, the rules of the MLS state that we must report any status changes within 24 hours. And so we will need to go ahead and report that as under agreement. The good news is the status that we use is called show, which will encourage, as the name sounds, other agents to continue to at least make phone calls and talk with me about the availability of the property. Right? Sometimes you just have to say, sorry, that's not the rules. The rules are this. Remember, right, sometimes we get confused. Well, but the seller told me I have to follow the instructions of the seller. Be careful. You have to follow the lawful instructions of the seller. And instructions that go against the rules of the regulations or are against the law, they're outside the scope of lawful instruction, right? And again, you don't have to necessarily make them wrong. You just have to explain, unfortunately, that's not the way this works. Did you ever see that commercial from a couple of years ago, right, with the two old ladies sitting on the couch talking about Facebook, and the one who knows how it works, the one is pinning photos on her wall, literally on her wall. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm putting photos on my wall. It's like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. I loved that commercial. Just the way that woman said, that's not how any of this works. You can have that conversation with the seller, right? And the prefix script that I like in those situations is, I completely understand. Would it surprise you to know that, right? That's another one of those scripts that you can use to soften the blow of what comes next, right? Would it surprise you to know that that actually is not something I'm able to do because of the rules and regulations of the multiple listing service? The good news is we do get to move it to a status that still encourages people to reach out and have a discussion about your property. Make sense? Number 16, stop by the inspection and check in. See if there's any information that you can provide. I'll tell you 16, I'll interpret two ways for you. As the listing agent, are you there for the entire inspection? Yeah, no is the right answer to that, right? First of all, it's not your place, right? That is the buyer's time to be with their representatives in the house. Second of all, you don't have time for that, right? You don't have time to spend 2 or 3 hours in a listing of yours at the inspection. You'll get the report on the tail end. When I was less busy and it worked in my schedule, I would find a way to stop in just to kind of pull up, say hi, hey, how's it going? Any questions I can answer while I'm here? And then I would be off. Maximum of 5 minutes. I will tell you that as my business grew, that was one of the first things I cut. There was just no reason for me to be there. I would do my best to make a phone call to the buyer's agent during the inspection. Hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can help with? Any questions that you're struggling with? Anything you need me to ask the owners, right? Call from a position of being helpful, but you hanging out there. And so again, sometimes what if the seller says, well, you're going to be at my inspection, right? To represent me. Yeah, I understand why that might be a question you would ask. Would it surprise you to know that that's actually not a best practice? Best practices are we give the seller their opportunity to be in your property with their representatives and their professionals for the time that they need to figure out what they need to figure out. Guys, think about it. Do you respond well when someone comes in and like starts looking over your shoulder at what you're doing? Right? It makes me completely nuts. I don't even like when I'm sitting typing an email and someone comes behind me and stops. I'm like, okay, what? I'm like, this is my communication. Keep moving. Right? So it's that you don't want people to feel like they're being hung over. It doesn't create a positive approach for the remainder of the transaction. It doesn't create positive vibes. It doesn't help in any real or perceived fashion. Yes, Alex.
I have a deep trauma to share about that. and this was before I was licensed, which is, can't even remember, 20 years ago when I bought my house. And I walked in and the sellers and their agent were here during the entire inspection. And I just felt so violated.
Yep. Yeah, because you didn't get the time that you needed to be alone with the house that you were purchasing.
Plus, I felt like they were very suspicious of me, and here I am taking and wanting to love their home.
Yeah. Yeah, no good comes from it, guys. So don't, if you think you're doing your seller a favor by agreeing to go and be at the inspection as the listing agent, I can tell you that you unfortunately, it's the exact opposite. You're actually doing your seller a disservice. And Alex just gave us the exact reason why. Number 17, it's at this point that you'll need to keep all parties in action. Set a schedule for yourself to be in constant contact, which means at least every couple of days with your sellers, with the buyer's agent, with the seller's attorney, with anybody else who might be important, right? Maybe with vendors who you have to hire to address some inspection items that you agreed to address, whatever. But that when I say you have to keep all the plates spinning, I'm not kidding. At some point, you literally have to spin this plate, move on to the next one, spin this one, move on to the next one, spin that one, move on to the next one, right? And by the time you get here, guess what's happening down to that plate at the end? You got to run back down and then you got to spin the plate again. And it becomes this game of keeping all the plates spinning. And I will tell you that as a listing agent, oftentimes people will come to me and complain and say, I don't understand why as a listing agent, I feel like I have to do everybody else's job. I'm going to give you an answer to why that feels like that, because that's the job of a listing agent. It feels like you're doing everybody else's job because your responsibility is to make sure everybody is doing their job, including you, which is to make sure everybody else is doing their job, right? I had an agent a couple of years ago come to me and say she was so irritated because she was struggling with a closing. And she came to me and she said, I just don't know what else to do with this in this scenario. So what's going on? She said, well, we were supposed to have this closing like on Monday. It was Wednesday prior. We're supposed to have this closing on Monday. And I just found out that nobody told the tenants. This was a property where the tenants were to be given 30 days notice prior to the closing because they were on a month-to-month so that they could time their move out with the closing. She said, and so now we have to wait another 3.5 weeks because it was just discovered that the tenants were never given notice. And I said, oh my goodness, you're kidding. How did that happen? And she said, well, I have no idea. The attorneys were supposed to advise them. And I said, you sure it was supposed to be the attorneys? And she said, well, I guess the sellers could have done it as well. And I said, uh-huh. And who else? Like, I wanted to move to a point where she kind of recognized that she could have solved her own problem by just making a note. She either could have advised the tenants herself after getting permission from the landlord, or she could have reminded the landlord to make that call, or she could have reminded the landlord to talk to their attorney, or she could have called the attorney, or she could have reminded both people, or she could have waved her hands and said, hey, if no one's going to call these tenants, I'll do it, just give me the okay, right? She could have done a ton of different things that could have prevented this delay in the closing, but instead she got angry that nobody else did their job. And I thought I was fascinated by that she took zero responsibility as the listing agent in that scenario for communicating that information. She didn't love the way that conversation ended. And I think she was irritated with me and kind of, okay, whatever. But you see, like, as the listing agent, to me, the buck stops right there. What systems did you put in place? Because I asked her, I said, did you know about the fact that the tenant had to be notified 30 days in advance? And she said, yeah, of course, it was part of the negotiation. Okay. Well, if we're looking around for someone to be upset with, hold on, I think I have a mirror someplace close. Here we go. Right? It was a coaching moment that wasn't appreciated, but I think hopefully it was appreciated long-term, right? But my point to you is this: you're the one who gets to make those decisions. You're the ones who gets to put those systems in place. You're the one who gets to make sure everybody else's job is being done. Number 18, once inspections are done, you can expect to hear from the buyer's agent within 48 hours or so regarding any items that might need to be addressed, right? Set expectations with the buyer's agent about when you will hear from them, and if they don't call, proactively call them. The point on this one is, if you're waiting for a conversation about inspections, even if you've said, look, we're not addressing any inspection issues or whatnot, as the listing agent, you still need to reach out and say, hey, buyer's agent, is there anything that we should know about from the inspections? I just want to be certain that there's no inspection issues. If you remember, we said that your clients were doing it for informational purposes only. And I want to be certain that they are content with the fact that they've done them, they got the information they needed, and nothing's going to rear its ugly head. And part of the reason that we don't ask those questions is because sometimes we don't want to know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I will tell you, it's worse when something pops up a week before the closing than a month before the closing. Kimberly, did you have something, or did I say it already?
Yeah, one of the things that I use, again, going back to systems, is on Sunday evening and Wednesday, whether I'm representing the seller or the buyer, I write a Gmail email and say, hey guys, just checking on to make sure there's anything that needs to be done. Are we all on the same page? Where are we in the process? Do you need anything from me? If I'm representing the seller, it goes to the seller, their attorney. If I'm representing the buyer, it goes to the mortgage person, the buyer, and their attorney. And then that way, whoever needs something, they're able to reply to that email and everybody sees it together. What I do is, and I just learned this year, you can set a time for those emails to be delivered on a certain time and a certain day. So while I will write the emails out Sunday, and it's really a cut and paste for my sellers, for my buyer clients, I actually plan when they're going to be mailed, and I program that in Gmail, where you had the little send button. There's a little X there where you can actually plan it on the calendar, and then I'm able to walk away from it automatically. They will get that Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and then again Tuesday, and then again Thursday at 8 o'clock. And then I'm just replying to emails at that point. But then, the buyer knows the contracts haven't been signed, the appraisal needs to be done. And then it gives us some point of clarification so that we're all on the same page. So there's no surprises saying, oh, the inspection hasn't, we don't have their inspection results. But it kind of helps me kind of put that out there and kind of type the email and forget about it until I have to reply.
That's brilliant. I love that. I hope you all wrote that down, because that's excellent. Right? And because now you're using a system to replace you trying to remember, right? Here's what I'll tell you, I have learned. It's easy, when you have one listing or two listings, it's easy to remember all this stuff that you have to do, everything that's going on. When you have 15 listings or 24 listings or 34 listings, guess what? The human brain just doesn't, you just can't keep up, right? I would even offer to you, as you start to crest into the double digits, right? You get to 8 or 10. There's just too many things going on in too many different columns. So you have to start utilizing systems like that so that you're not forgetting about things. And the constancy and the consistency combined with what Kimberly just said is what makes that such a winning system. It's a system that they get Monday and Thursday, so twice a week for as long as you're pending, right? Because everyone then gets an update about where we are. And if there's nothing that has to be done, well, then everyone knows nothing has to be done. And yet it was the question was asked. That's a brilliant system. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Sheila.
Hi. Kimberly, is that a certain software that you're using?
Just Gmail.
It's just Gmail. If you go to compose and then to the right of the send button, there's a down arrow and it says more send options. You can schedule the send.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Number 19, keep tabs on the mortgage. Has the client made formal application? Has the appraisal been scheduled? When is it? Right? These are all, I'm just kind of seeding you with questions. And some of these questions might be part of the system you build that Kimberly just talked about, right? If the appraisal hasn't been done, maybe one of the questions is, hey, what do we know about the appraisal? Hey, what do we know about whatever, right? So sometimes somebody else has a piece of information that maybe you don't have. Number 20, inform the sellers when the appraisal is going to take place. Once you know it. 21, check in with the seller's attorney to ensure that you know when the contracts are completed and have been sent to the buyer's attorney. If in fact there's going to be a replacement contract, right? Sometimes what we sign is just used as the contract, and sometimes there's an attorney replaced contract. If that's the case, we need to know where that is and make sure that everyone's moving towards signing it. 22, once you know that the contracts have been sent, let the buyer's agent know so that they can start following up with their side. Right? That's one of those things that drives me the craziest when someone calls me and says, I don't know what else to do. I'm pulling my hair out. The contracts went out a week ago and the sellers are so upset because we don't have them back. I'm like, okay, well, who's following up with all of that, right? Someone has to know where they are. So what have you done as the listing agent? Have you called the seller's attorney and encouraged the seller's attorney to contact the buyer's attorney? Have you called the buyer's agent and encouraged them to ask the buyers, call the buyer's agent, right? Have you offered to have a conference call with anyone who will listen or talk to you? Have you sent some emails saying, you know what, danger, Will Robinson, if we don't get contracts back in a couple of days, the sellers are going to put the house back on the market, right? Have we done all the things that we need to do to find out where the sticking point is, right? And oftentimes the answer is no, we haven't done enough. We've just chosen to be irritated that things didn't go as smoothly as we hoped. Trust me, just being irritated doesn't solve a problem. So let's pause there for a second. It's interesting, right? If you are not a natural problem solver, that's another muscle you have to continue to build. Is you need to move to get out of the I'm irritated, this is frustrating, I don't understand. Get out of trying to find blame. None of that matters. What matters is how do we take another step forward? What is the end result? And nothing in here kind of makes a difference except how we're going to step forward. It was fascinating. Debbie came into what I now lovingly call my studio, right, the other day, and she was giving me this information about something she had found out about somebody that she was just shocked about, and it was a client of hers, and I knew she was struggling getting a rental together with them, and she came in to tell me this story about like some driver's license or something. And I immediately in my head, like she didn't come in and say, how am I going to solve this issue if there's a driver's license issue with this renter? She came in to tell me like the nugget about this particular driver's license. And in my head, because I have so completely trained myself to pivot towards problem solving, is I didn't even give her the satisfaction of saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe XYZ about the, like she came in to tell me the joke side of it. And I was like, huh, well, that's interesting. And yet, you know what, if you go to the listing agent and kind of explain that this doesn't exist, maybe you could have this, what, I went right into this problem solving mode and she's looking at me like, well, okay, well, thank you. But that wasn't the point of the conversation. And so my point to you is, are you building that muscle of problem solving? Because frankly, it's more useful than it is irritating, right? In that scenario, I went home, I didn't even realize it. I went home later on and thought, huh, she didn't ask me my opinion about how to solve that issue. I just kind of naturally went to that problem solving mode. Do you naturally go to a problem solving mode? Or do you get stuck in how it feels or what it looks like, or one of the traits of a listing agent, right, and an effective listing agent is recognize, and you should write this down, don't be afraid of the potholes, because it's because the potholes exist that we exist. So many people come to me and say, this is falling apart. This is what's happening. I'm like, well, of course it is. We call that Tuesday in real estate. Right? Things happen. That's why we have a job. That's why we're there to problem solve through all of that and troubleshoot through all of that. I'd rather you just expect things to go sideways in every transaction that you have and do a little happy dance on the one or two that show up where there's no issues, than always be surprised. You know, to me, that's kind of like, you know, you get to December 30th and someone says, well, you know, there's going to be something new in the new year. And you think, well, you know, how long do I have? Like, well, you have 48 hours because the new year starts on January 1st. And you say, oh, you're kidding. They're starting the new year on January 1st this year? Well, who told me? I haven't gotten calendars I wasn't notified, right? Stop being so shocked. Because stuff just happens. And the fact that stuff happens is the reason we exist. Number 23, negotiate any inspection items. If you haven't done this earlier, get that taken care of, right? And let's know what that list is so that the sellers know what they have to do. Let's make sure that the list is in writing and goes to both attorneys so that everyone's clear about who's doing what. Number 24, check in with the buyer's mortgage again. Know the contingency date, whether or not the buyers will meet that. Stay in touch, right? You're looking now at all the dates in the contracts as the listing agent. Don't just decide that that's the attorney's job. Too many of us pass on that obligation to know what the dates are and make phone calls around, hey, you know what? The mortgage contingency is about only 3 days away. What do we know? Hey, the inspection contingency, that we're supposed to have inspections done by Thursday. It's Tuesday night. I still don't know when the inspections are happening, right? Those are all it's part of the listing agent's job is to keep all that in front of them. I used to have a calendar in front of me for my listings and with dates. So it would be the address and mortgage contingency date. It would be the address and inspections done by. So I could look at a calendar that I hand wrote to make sure all those dates were happening and I was hitting them for the sellers. And that meant communicating with the buyer's agent. Number 25, this is an important one. You should put a star next to it. It might sound a little crazy. Number 25, encourage the sellers to begin packing. Once we're to this point, the sellers should start to trust that this is going to move forward to a closing, and they should start packing. I don't know about the rest of you, but I have spent far too many hours with panicked sellers who are trying to delay closings because they did not take enough time to pack their crap up. There's more stuff in the basement than they thought. There's more stuff in the attic. Sometimes they forget about the attic, right? So we want them to start packing literally a month before their closing date. Start giving them, pushing boxes at them, having them call movers if they haven't been doing that. Now is the time to do that. Get them focused on getting ready because it takes them longer than they normally think it does. Number 26, once you have a signed contract and agreement to all inspection items and a mortgage that's moving along, you may fall into a period of time where not much is occurring, right? There's this little kind of blackout period of 30, sometimes 45 days where all the stuff is happening or not too much day to day before the week before the closing. You need to make sure that you're in constant communication with everybody during that period as well. If you use Kimberly's system, well, your email should continue to go out, right? But you want to make sure that every 2 to 3 days minimally, you're touching base with the players, especially your sellers. If you fall off during that period of time and then magically reappear the week before the closing, trust me when I tell you what the message that sends to your clients is that what they are to you is a commission. That is not a good look on a real estate agent. So have a system in place to make sure that you're continuing to communicate. Number 27, make sure the market centers know of any changes to closings or anything that's going on. If all of a sudden there's a concession and the agreement is that you're getting paid on the lower number, right, once the concession happens, any changes to the transaction in terms of terms or closing date, make sure you're communicating that to your MCAs. They work off of a system to send invoices for your transactions. And if the closing date changes and they have the wrong closing date, well, the invoice either may not go out in time or it may go out too early and then the changes have to be made. We have to send a revised one. So just once you submit all that into KW Concierge Services, remember that submission is only valid for one go. If something changes, now it's up to you to go in and make sure that change occurs. Minimally, send an email to your MCAs to say, hey, this is what's going on with this transaction, so they can go in and make those changes. Number 28, once a closing date's been settled on, mark your calendars for a week or so prior, and then start reminding the seller of all the things that have to happen, right? Make sure you remind them about terminating their utilities. And oftentimes that just means putting in a transfer notice, right? If they go and they terminate things, oftentimes it's far harder for the new folks to actually get those turned on in their name. So we don't necessarily recommend terminating them, but terminating them in their name. So giving a transfer call or putting the utilities on notice that the transfer is going to be made. Call to arrange for an oil tank reading. If the house is heated by oil, why do the sellers have to arrange for an oil tank reading? What's the point of that?
The buyers have to pay the oil, have to buy the oil.
Credit.
Yeah, so it's called apportionment, right? And so one of the things that's apportioned at the closing is the oil. So the buyers will buy the amount of oil that's in the oil tank from the sellers. But the only way we know that is if we get the oil company to come out and stick the tank, right, and do a reading. So that has to be done. Speak to the attorney if there's anything else that might need apportioning. Sometimes if you're on private water, sometimes water bills get apportioned, right? So speak to the attorney and make sure that there's nothing else that you need to do to help with apportioning. The sellers have to take care of a change of address online, like with the postal service. They might need to change their address on their license. I think in the state of Connecticut, you have 30 days when you move to get an update to your license, right? A lot of people don't do that. So just make sure your sellers know that that's something that they should look into. Make sure that they're gathering all the keys for the house and be prepared for closing day. Make sure they're gathering any warranties or manuals for things that are going to be left behind, right? And they're sticking them in just one drawer or something. These are all things that, if you're looking for ways to stay in communication and make a phone call every other day or so, these are just ideas to give that allow you to have another conversation. Hey, just wanted to call to remind you about this. Hey, just wanted to call to check in and see if you need help on that. Hey, just wanted to call you and remind you about this, right? I'm sure there are others and that you might have some that you utilize. This is just one of those lists. Number 30, check in daily, right? Perhaps using the above list. As closing day approaches, find out if the sellers need assistance in any way, meeting any deadlines. Do you need help with movers? Do you need more boxes? You know, can I point you in the direction of so-and-so? Do you need help lugging things out, right? Maybe I can arrange for you to call X company that's, you know, junk luggers, or, you know, get another dumpster at your house if you thought there was less stuff to throw out. Anything that they might need. Recognize that this is a stressful time for them, and the more supportive that you can be, the better your reviews will be at the end. Number 31, perhaps send lunch to the seller's house on the main move-out day. I'm going to tell you, this was probably the most powerful thing that we started to do, that we still do today in my sales team, is make sure that we know when the sellers themselves are going to be the main move-out day for them, and we always send lunch. And we always ask how many people will be there. Is it just for you and the kids, or will the kids be someplace else? By the way, do you have professional movers? Do you know how many movers will be there? We buy lunch for the movers on that day as well. And the reason we do that is because, I don't know about the rest of you, but have you ever had an experience where the movers come and they start doing the work? The last time I moved, which was a long time ago, but the last time I moved, the movers came, they worked all morning, and about 11:40 or so, as all of my living room furniture and some of the bedroom furniture was now on the front lawn, I'm looking out over yonder, and the big dark rain clouds are approaching, and my movers are getting in the truck. and starting the truck. I'm like, oh, no, hey, hello. What, like, where are you going? They're like, it's lunch. We'll be back in 40 minutes. Like, 40 minutes, do you see what's coming? They're like, we checked the weather, it'll be fine. And off they drove. So now I'm like cutting up garbage bags to put over my couch. Now they came back and it didn't rain, and they did get the stuff. It rained later, but they were right. But I was like a wreck. So from that, we just started not only to send lunch for the actual sellers and their family, because remember, on moving day, oftentimes, even if you're not doing it, you're still there. There's nothing in the fridge. And even if there is, there's no forks to eat it with, and there's no plates, right? So what we do is we send anybody who's there, we just ask the sellers how many people will be there, including your movers, and then we just send lunch. We typically send either pizza and salad with soda, or we get a couple of 3-foot heroes from the local deli. We'll do like an Italian and a veggie and send that over with cans of different sodas, or a case of water is easy because everyone drinks water, right? So don't make it hard, but I'll tell you, we get better press for that than we do for any closing gift or anything. They mentioned it in almost every review, and they sent us lunch. It was like a godsend. So it's just one of those things I pass on because it really works for us and works for our sellers. 32, remove the lockbox from the house. Call down the sign, remove the signing materials, right? So you have all your stuff that has to be called down. Number 33, make sure the sellers know when the buyer's agents will do a walkthrough, right? So that they know that they're coming. Even if they won't be there, everyone should just know when the walkthrough is going to be, that the buyers come with the seller, the buyer's agent comes with the buyers at the very last moment, the night before or the day of the closing. Number 34, number 34 dates this document. It says go to the closing with the seller. I understand that for all intents and purposes, we're not going to closings much anymore, right? Back in my day, everybody went to a closing. We all sat around a table, the buyers, the sellers, both agents, both attorneys, right? Everyone held hands, sang kumbaya. We had a little campfire in the middle of the conference room. We roasted marshmallows. It was a fun time. I get that that's not what happens anymore. However, you can interpret number 34 to be as supportive around the closing as you possibly can, right? Sometimes it means you can show up when the sellers sign, just to kind of support them and smile. And yet, oftentimes those things are happening remotely, right? The clients themselves are not even really attending closings much anymore. So I get where that may be a dated idea. However, the fact that you want to obtain testimonials is not a dated idea. As a matter of fact, that's more relevant today than it was back then. Because what you want, part of the reason you might want to arrange a face-to-face in and around the closing is because you want a video testimonial, right? Minimally, you want to make sure that they're writing you some version of a testimonial. And you never look better in the eyes of the seller than the day of the closing. So you want to make sure that you're having some communication around their happy day being celebratory, and seeing if you can't grab either a video or a written testimonial from them on that day or within 24 hours. Then, of course, 35, you're reporting the property is sold in the MLS. Again, that's now within 24 hours because that has changed. Number 36, follow up with the seller 24 hours after the closing just to check in. I know that they're moving to another house that maybe isn't even in the same state, but you still want to make a phone call to your client within 24 hours to say, how's it going? You want to send a closing gift, either the day of the closing or send it along those next few days as they're moving to the next house, if that's part of your plan. Follow up also 1 week later, and then of course 30 days later. Now remember, that goes for your clients, but we talked about orphans, right? And so don't forget about your orphan plan. When you are the listing agent, the buyers of your listing can fall into that same follow-up plan, that you're calling them 24 to 48 hours after the closing, also on the 1 week anniversary and on the 30-day anniversary. right? So you're not just calling your seller who has moved into another house, but you're contacting and perhaps sending even a closing gift to the buyers of that new house. You want to start capturing them as your clients as quickly as you possibly can. You then want to place everybody on a post-close follow-up system, right? That 36 touch. So not only your seller who's likely already on it, and if not, you want to add them, but certainly the orphan on the other side. Troubleshoot anything along the way. And then number 41 is probably the most important part of this whole checklist. Go list another one. Just keep it going, baby. Yes.
I have a question about the walkthrough.
Yes.
So I had two situations which were a problem. Number one, we did the walkthrough, and the refrigerator in the garage was gone, even though it was not on the exclusion list. So that became a big deal on the closing day. So
yes. So you represented the buyer on that side?
Yes.
Yeah. So I promise you, when we go through the anatomy of a buyer transaction, that is part of our conversation. So look towards next week, and I'll have an answer for you on that.
Okay. Second one, I was a listing agent, and on the day of the walkthrough, we made the house available. It was already vacant. They had already moved out. These people stayed for 2 hours, took some shelves, apart, and went and made a key. Somebody went to the whatever store, hardware store, and made a key so they could get in the next morning at 7 a.m. I went to bring them the key. They were already there, doing the floor treatments, whatnot. How do you control that? I mean, you're not supposed to be there more than, I don't know, certainly not over an hour, but 20 minutes, half an hour.
Well, I'm not sure. I think that's probably one of those extreme cases, right? Most people are doing walkthroughs and just doing a walkthrough, and I'm not even so sure that the time in the house is the bigger issue. I think the bigger issue is copying a key without permission, right? So one of the things that I used to do, it's not ideal, and yet it worked, is I used to take the lockbox off prior to the walkthrough. And so then the agent doing the walkthrough had to come and get the key from me and return it to me. And then I would bring it to the attorney.
I did that on my last closing. They wanted to give the people the key after the walkthrough. I said, no, the sellers want to make sure we're closed before they get the key. And I made them put the key back in the key box, and I delivered it to them after. They were
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, so that is the preferred method. Understand that nobody has a right to a key until after they've actually closed, right? And part of and sometimes what happens is, I'll tell you a quick story. Do we have time for a quick story? Yeah, this will bring us to the end of our time, right? So I had a situation once where I represented the seller, and everyone came to the closing. I will tell you that I believe that real estate agents should never touch keys. And what I mean by that is touch them from the perspective of giving them to a buyer, whether you're the buyer's agent or the listing agent. I believe that our job is to make sure that the owner of the property gets keys to to their attorney, and then the attorney can push the keys to the buyer's attorney when they're currying stuff back and forth. And again, there are a lot of people who disagree with me about that, but there's too many examples I could give you of horror stories where people felt like they deserved the key and then had the key and shouldn't have had the key. And guess what? When we're the ones who are giving out the key, guess where the liability can fall if something happens? It comes back on us, right? So I just like the idea of, I don't touch keys. And yet, I represented the seller in this one scenario, and we got to the closing, again, back in the day when we were all coming to the closing, and we sat there for like 3 hours waiting for the money to arrive, and then determined that the money was not arriving. We had a dry closing, right? If anybody ever says dry closing, that's what that means. The money doesn't arrive. And so everyone was like, okay, so we'll reconvene tomorrow morning at like 11 o'clock. We'll get the closing done. No problem, no issues, whatever. Thanks for waiting around, everybody. Okay, everyone went their separate ways. We come back the next morning, and we're all kind of milling about in the conference room, waiting for the closing to actually begin. And the buyers say to the sellers, oh, so before we begin, we we couldn't figure out, we were trying to take showers this morning, and we couldn't quite figure out in the one bathroom and in the master exactly how to get the hot water to come on. Like everyone stops and like, wait, I'm sorry, what? You were doing what? Where? They're like, well, when we got up this morning, we were trying to take a shower, and it just seems like we're not sure if we're doing it wrong. And like, no, we're not asking about the functionality of the shower. But where were you this morning? Like, what do you mean? We were in the house. The buyer's agent had given them the key at the closing that then never occurred. Nobody knew that they had the key. Everyone else just assumed that everyone was going home to their homes and this house was going to remain empty. Nope, the buyers had the key and they thought, well, we'll just go there. And so they went to the house, spent the night in the house, like moved a mattress in, and then they woke up, had breakfast, did whatever they were going to do. Now, again, it was innocent in that scenario. They just didn't know. Again, the buyer's agent shouldn't have given them the key, because here's the problem. What would have happened if overnight the house burned down? What would have happened if the house burned down and they were in it? Right? Do you see how liability is well, I won't say what I was going to say. Liability is a funny thing, right? And all of a sudden you have things that could occur when somebody who doesn't belong in the house is now in the house. What if all of a sudden the buyers decided, hey, you know what, we're actually we're not going to come to the closing. We won't sign the papers now. Well, now you have squatters. Now you have to I know these things sound ridiculous, but part of my job is to assess risk for our organization, right? And can continue to advise on how we can reduce risk. And so my mind immediately goes to what's the list of 97 things that could happen in a scenario where people are in a house they don't own, they don't belong there. What could happen that could cause problems for the current owners, problems for the buyers, problems for the transaction, problem for the real estate brokerages, on and on and on. So we've got Kimberly and Carol, and then we're out. So go for it.
So in this case, in the current environment where we're not allowed to go to the closing, is it your recommendation after the walkthrough that can we deliver the keys to the buyer's attorney?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think if we're going to have a role in that, as long as our role is getting keys to an attorney, so that it's an attorney who's handing a key to the client, to the buyer client, mm-hmm. Then it's not us handing it to them. That's the piece that I think creates some exposure on our part. So I like getting it to somebody's attorney, and then they can figure out how to get it to the buyers.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Carol.
Okay, just quickly, that does happen, Rick. When I first started working in Westport, a builder sold his house to people from California. They came in on a Friday with their big moving truck. They asked him if, please, we don't want to leave everything there for the weekend. The closing is Monday. Could we please put everything in the house? Being a nice guy, he said yes. Monday came, they never closed on the house ever and stole the house from this builder.
Yeah, right. That's ultimately, they're called squatters, right? And you have to bring legal action to evict squatters. I mean, it can turn so nasty. And the reality is that doesn't happen very often. And yet you can see from some of these examples, it does happen sometimes. Yes. So the best defense against it is to have a system in place where even if it does happen, you weren't the one who handed somebody a key.
That's
right?
Exactly. And what happened to me was, after I heard that story, I had a builder also, and the buyer broker said the same thing to me. They moved the truck in. Carol, we just want to put things in the garage and in the house. We're going to close in a couple of hours. I said, don't you dare. I don't even want a pencil in that house until money changes hands. That's it.
Yeah, right. And ultimately, what you get to do is say, you know what, look, that's not my call. The seller has forbidden it, and or you need to speak to the attorneys. because if something's going to be moved in, we need to have a hold harmless, we need to have some indemnification, we need to have an agreement, we need to have money in escrow, we need to have all this stuff.
Yeah.
Not just as simple as you saying, I'm going to put some stuff on the property, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And-
All of that is just kind of a standard that one sets. And the good news is you get to deflect some of that to the attorneys if in fact you're getting pressure on it.
And
Even if the seller says, hey, you know what, Rick, I don't think it's a big deal. You know what, do me a favor, speak to your attorney before you tell me it's not a big deal.
That's what happened. The seller said to me, yes, I'll let them in. I said, no, I already know what can happen. We're not letting them in.
You don't even know what's in the stuff, in the boxes.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the guns and the ammunition and the right, you name it. All right, guys, we are out of time. Patrick, thank you for that reminder. I'm going to have to do that. The other news is that I don't have that document on this computer. So I need to send it to this computer so I can share it with you. And my other computer is in the other room. So we will have tomorrow off. I'll see you all at Red Day. I'm going to be making my rounds tomorrow. I can't wait to actually meet some of you in person because some of you I've never actually met in person. So some of you I'll see that I haven't seen in a long time. Some of you I'll meet in person. We'll get a whole bunch of great stuff done for our communities tomorrow. We have tomorrow night off. I will see you again next Tuesday and Wednesday, 4 to 6, and we will finish up with buyers. Guys, have an awesome evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.